Folks, I got a bit of a social media issue, a bit of a problem, and I want to unpack it. I want to talk about it a little bit. I want to talk about what got me into the funk and then go over like an experiment I ran, go over some data analyses on how that experiment went, uncovering insights into my screen time, and then I'll reveal my genius plan on how I'm going to get myself out of this funk. So like many of you, one day I went into my settings app, just curious, what my screen time is, because it's always fun to see how much time you're wasting. And I was averaging, 4.5, 5.5 hours sometimes, and it's just like, it just doesn't feel good, and then you see those videos, it's like, oh, the average American wastes 100 years of their life on social media. It's just something just so ridiculous. I was looking at my screen time and I'm just like, yeah, I definitely am not happy with the amount of time that I spend on my phone. I see sort of what's taken up the bulk of my time, and social media wasn't number one, but it was up there. So I was like, that's an easy one to start with, to start cutting back, that is. So what I decided to do is my friend put me on to this app called ScreenTime, which is actually an effective way to limit how much time you spend on any app that you want to control. So rather than setting limits for social media within the settings app and the screen time app or whatever, where you can just override every time you open the app, like 15 more minutes, like I'm sure you've tried before. For ScreenTime, you can put hard blocks on apps, like you just literally won't be able to open them during certain periods of the day. Or you could say, I want to only be able to open Instagram 3 times a day for 5 minutes at a time or something like that, and then it'll kick you out. You can customize however you want. Not sponsored, but gee, I wish. So I downloaded ScreenTime. I decided to put limits on my social media apps, which for me, I just put limits on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn, which is kind of funny, but I know that sounds a little ridiculous. But what happens is I go on Instagram, I get bored. I open up Snapchat just to see 5 years ago today memories and see what my friends are doing. And then I'll go on Facebook just to see if my mom posted or something. She does that sometimes. And then I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll spend time on there. And funny enough, LinkedIn makes me feel worse than most of all those other apps, because I open it and I just see, oh, here's someone 3 years younger than you, and they're making twice as much money as you now. And you're like, oh, okay, bet. That's freaking sweet. That's awesome. And then TikTok, I just try not. I open it to see if someone sent me anything funny, but I don't really have a big issue with TikTok. So I downloaded ScreenTime, put limits on those social media apps. I think the configuration I used was I'm allowed to open them 5 times a day for 7 minutes at a time. So I started doing that November 2nd, I think. And I went into settings. I took the screen time data from, about 3-4 weeks prior to that, and then continued to scrape data November 2nd onwards to compare how my screen time changed pre and post limiting my apps via ScreenTime. So let's get into some of the numbers, huh? So here is a stacked bar chart that shows my screen time usage over time, and it's separated by social media apps in yellow, entertainment apps in red, messages, as I thought that was sort of separate, and then other, which just means anything else. So like I said, social includes Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. Entertainment contains YouTube and Spotify. Messages is messages, and other is everything else. So as you can see, my screen time is around 4.5 hours as an average. So the day that I implemented ScreenTime was, I think, November 2nd. So that's around here. And remember, for ScreenTime, I just put limits on my social media apps. So the only thing affected is really the yellow bars, right? So before, you can see I had a 1.6 hours, 0.5, 1.7, whatever, kind of averaging around an hour. And then I implemented ScreenTime November 2nd, and then it does go down considerably. I think looking at the stat, it was I averaged 1.05 hours per day on social media apps pre-ScreenTime, and post-ScreenTime, I averaged, I think, 0.55. So basically slashed it in half, more or less. What's funny, though, is that overall, even though I'm spending less time on social media, my screen time is still more or less unchanged. I think it actually went up 10 minutes or something on average. So my screen time virtually unchanged, but it did do what it set out to do, which is limit my time on social media. Looking at this graph, I'm realizing I'm still spending a ridiculous amount of time on entertainment, which is basically YouTube. I mean, Spotify's thrown in there, but I'm not spending a lot of time actually on the Spotify app with the screen open, but I spent a lot of time on YouTube, listening to long form videos and podcasts and video essays and stuff like that. So I'm still spending a ridiculous amount of time on my phone, and you can see messages kind of went crazy. It started to just bonkers the last few weeks. I think these ones over here, these big bars over here, were me watching the political debate Jubilee videos before the election, which honestly I really enjoy. Scrolling down a little bit, we have just another line graph that shows my usage over time for these apps, just a little bit of a different view. However, I think it's easier to view this like fewer data points. So if we look at the weekly view, we're going back up here, we can see social media does decrease generally after the November 2nd time frame where I put limits on the apps. If we go down here, we can see something similar. So it goes up slightly, but then levels out, and my time spent on social media is generally lower, about half as lower on average compared to pre-Screen Zen. But everything else kind of went up or stayed the same. So to look at the actual numbers, we have social media apps pre-Screen Zen was 1.05 hours, post was 0.53, so kind of slashed in half. Entertainment, aka YouTube and Spotify, went down a bit. Messages went up. Other went up. I don't know if I'm spending a lot of time like in the weather app or Surfline. I'm not really sure what all that hours. Actually, some of that is FaceTime. FaceTime is considered another app. So there's that. Okay, so after looking at this data, I'm thinking, why don't I just get rid of social media and go all in on YouTube? What I mean by that is like social media isn't really serving me very well. I mean, if I got rid of social media, I really wouldn't miss it. The only thing I would miss is like consistently seeing like the new memes. But I do think I'm well versed enough in memes that my current knowledge can last me like half a lifetime. So I feel like I can still make epic references and whatnot without knowing the latest, or maybe I can just trust my brother to send me good ones over text or something. So getting rid of social media really isn't a big deal for me. YouTube, on the other hand, I mean, YouTube is technically social media, but it's different. And I don't know if it's just a cope to be like, yeah, I won't use social media, but I spend 2 hours a day on YouTube, and that's okay. But I feel like if you consume it in a certain way, it's fine. I mean, again, it could be a cope, because in my mind, it's like social media, YouTube, books in terms of like consuming information and whatnot. I guess books and articles. But I don't really have the patience to read lots of books. And I know that sounds bad, but it's like I want the knowledge now. So it's like when you read a book, it's a slow burn. And I just feel like I have so many varied interests that it'd be the most effective use of my time to watch medium form YouTube videos. So I don't think just getting hooked on YouTube is a long-term solution. But for right now, I think if I do it strategically, in that, yeah, maybe I still have a couple entertainment videos a day, but I need to hold myself accountable to watching educational videos and taking notes on them so that I can reference them later. I can turn those ideas into something. I feel as though YouTube is the best, most efficient way to get varied ideas into my brain so that I can then use those ideas and they could inform a podcast idea or a conversation with a friend or a YouTube video or whatever. So all this could be cope. Yeah, I'm not giving up social media forever if I'm going to be using YouTube, but I think deleting the standard social media apps like Instagram and TikTok and Snap, whatever, I think that's a good step in the direction. Maybe one day I'll just only read books, but even then that might be a cope too. So not exactly sure, but there's only one way to find out. So I guess stay tuned for a future video where I talk about my YouTube addiction and if it really helped me in my creative journey. Thanks for listening.